Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Curot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1995 movie titled Sense and Sensibility. Now, Sense and Sensibility is based on a novel by Jane Austen. It runs for 2 hours and 16 minutes. It is directed by Ang Lee, who also directed such memorable classics like Brokeback Mountain and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. The script was written by Emma Thompson. It was produced by Lindsay Doran. The score was by Patrick Doyle. The costumes were done by Jenny Bevan and John Bright. The cinematography was done by Michael Coulter, and it was edited by Tim Squires. What did I think of this movie? Well, if you take a deeply provocative story like Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility and deliver an ensemble of talented performers, it totals up to one riveting film-watching experience. And if that's not enough for you, Columbia Pictures had produced an equally poignant DVD with some excellent features that will really get you fired up, along with the deleted scenes that you really don't want to miss. The movie follows a lot of the important events from the novel, and the reenactment from the thespians make it all seem possible by making it all the more to appreciate the work of Jane Austen and why she was one of the great literary geniuses of her time period. I mean, yes, I have also seen Pride and Prejudice, and if you also like some of her other work like Persuasion, well, Sense and Sensibility has often been frowned upon as one of Jane Austen's weakest literary works, but I somehow seem to beg to differ. Our story commences as we see a dying Henry Dashwood, played by Tom Wilkinson, with his only son John, played by James Fleet, situated at his bedside. As he lays dying, he offers John his final will to him. He leaves his inheritance for him while leaving nothing to his second wife, played by Gemma Jones, and his 3 daughters, Eleanor, played by Emma Thompson, Marianne, played by Kate Winslet, and Margaret, played by Emily Francois. But he did insist that John watch over them and let them live in his inherited abode. However, John is married to a rather overbearing, greedy, selfish wife named Fanny, played by Harriet Walter, who eventually convinces John that they could look after themselves. But the women who can't get or inherit any of the money, so the only way they could get out of their doldrum is to marry rich guys rather than find true love. So this movie kind of is like the novel, is a balance between the determination of whether you want to marry for love or for money. And in the long run, you just can't have it both ways. Emma Thompson, who won a Golden Globe for Best Screenplay, plays the eldest daughter, Eleanor, who's an old maid who just can't keep her emotions in balance. Well, not to necessarily say that she's an old maid, but I think there was a little bit of a miscast in having Emma Thompson playing Eleanor Dashwood, because of the fact that in the novel, Eleanor's about 19 years old, and when this film came out, Emma Thompson was kind of in her late 30s. Meanwhile, middle daughter Marianne, played by Kate Winslet, is quite the polar opposite to Eleanor, as she is a very emotionally charged teenager who would love to have a man in her life, and the youngest daughter, Margaret, is a highly opinionated tomboy who also seems to have a thing for romance. The story eventually drives in full gear when Fanny's brother Edward Ferrars, played by Hugh Grant, enters their downtrodden lives and seems to know about the dilemma these ladies are facing and shows immediate compassion towards them. He becomes kind of like a father figure companion to little Margaret, and eventually has a mutual attraction to eldest daughter Eleanor. While Edward and Eleanor have proper ways of showing their emotions, Marianne doesn't find him really that attractive. In fact, she regards him as rather stoic and quite boring. Soon Fanny manipulates Mrs. Dashwood that Eleanor only wants to marry Edward for money rather than true love, and eventually he gets called back to London and has to stay there for a substantial amount of time. Eventually the women get to live in a cottage country which was given to them by their cousin Sir Thomas Middleton and their matchmaking relatives. Alan Rickman was actually quite pretty convincing in this role, as he kind of breaks away from typecasting. He usually is often seen playing more or less villainous characters, but now he's breaking away from typecasts to play a compassionate guy named Colonel Brandon, who has feelings for the much younger Marianne and seems charmed by her musicianship. She seems quite adept at playing the pianoforte and has such a beautiful melodic voice that he becomes smitten by her. But Marianne really has no interest in the much older Colonel Brandon, even though Mrs. Jennings, played by Elizabeth Spriggs, tells her all about his good traits. And when she shows a lack of interest to Colonel Brandon, you can see that deep down inside he's a sad man, desperate to find true love, even if she is below the poverty line. However, Marianne falls over heels with a young man named Mr. John Willoughby, played by Greg Wise, who literally swept her off her feet after she twisted her ankle in the falling rain. She eventually enjoys Willoughby's spontaneous company as they go around town on his horse-drawn carriage, much to the chagrin of older sister Eleanor. And just when Willoughby is about to ask Marianne to marry him, he gets sent back to London for an indefinite period of time, only to realize that he never really truly loved Marianne, and that eventually he went out to marry some rich lady. So he decided to take the route of love for money rather than true honest love. And true honest love doesn't necessarily have to come by to see whose wallets are thicker or who has the better inheritance. In fact, true love doesn't necessarily have to come from within the wallet, but from a very special place that's far more superior to the wallet. And I'm talking about the human heart, the soul. But Greg prefers money over love, so eventually he goes out and marries some rich lady, leaving Marianne in a hopeless romantic situation. While this is happening, another lady arrives on the scene. Her name is Lucy Steele, played by Imogen Stubbs, who tells Eleanor that she and Mr. Ferrars have been engaged for 5 years. Feeling that the Dashwood daughters' romantic lives are hopeless, Mrs. Jennings suggests that the ladies should leave their countryside home and go off to the big city, to London, to find better opportunities out there. When they reach London, the climax starts to unfold. What's amazing is that the ladies and the audience are expecting a happy ending as we anticipate secrets within the characters which are revealed. The acting is really what carries the film the whole way through as we watch. We feel like we are part of these characters' lives, and we feel for them the whole way through. The end result was that Lucy Steele did indeed marry a Mr. Ferrers, but it was not Edward. It was actually his younger brother Robert Ferrers whom she married, and that Edward eventually would go on to marry Eleanor. And even though Marianne may have lost out to John Willoughby, she eventually marries the much older Colonel Brandon, and this was probably one of the best happy endings and one of the best unfolding ways the story could go. In the end, I just like it when good characters prevail victorious. Sure, they may go through a lot of trials and tribulations, but I think that's just normal human life. We have our shares of victories. We have our shares of triumphs. But also through all our shares of triumphs, we've also had our share of failures. It's just the way how the human cycle goes. Nothing is automatic. We just have to live one day at a time, and I think that's the lesson that the Dashwoods learn in this story. The acting isn't the only thing that makes Sense and Sensibility such an engaging film. The brilliant cinematography of Michael Coulter is pure eye candy, and the costumes by Jenny Bevan and John Bright look and feel the time period which took place in the early 19th century. The DVD extras are something quite noteworthy too, which includes commentaries from star and scriptwriter Emma Thompson, co-producer Lindsay Doran, as well as director Ang Lee and co-producer James Seamus. Also featured are trailers for other films that also have a period piece feel to it, like Howard's End and Remains of the Day. But this is definitely a film that you should really check out, especially for those who appreciate the work of Jane Austen. If I was to give this film a score out of 10, it's an automatic 9.5 for me. I just really enjoyed the film. I loved the film so much. Jane Austen is definitely a great writer in her time period. Emma Thompson made the script feel very authentic without using any kind of 20th century colloquial implemented in the script. The mannerisms, the story itself is a bit haunting, but it feels like what you would expect in 18th, 19th century Britain. And I like the outcome and how it unfolds. It's definitely a treasured movie that any movie fan would truly appreciate. So I guess this ends my writer review for this week. Thank you all for listening again. Please subscribe to my channel. If you got any comments to make, please do so. Remember, be kind, be courteous, and I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.